Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I'm doing it with the windows open today because it's an absolutely beautiful day out, so hopefully none of the noises will bleed through. I'll do my usual filtering, but as always, let me know in the comments if it doesn't sound right. I'm always trying to do this correctly, but anyway, let's jump in and see what we got going on for the past week. First up is an absolutely incredible project for the N64 called N64 Recompiled, which is a program designed by developer WiseGuy that takes an N64 ROM and converts the code back into C, allowing it to be recompiled to run natively on Windows or Linux or whatever you need. And while there still needs to be a lot of manual interaction, it's not a fully automated press one button and get a perfect port of the game type of thing. It really is light years faster than doing it all manually. Now, of course, doing it manually, you have more options, you could do a lot more tweaks, but those projects generally have taken years of lots of fan contributions to make that happen. Modern Vintage Gamer actually posted a video just recently after this one was out showing how he did it and kind of having his perspective on it as well. So please check that video out as well as this one. But it really is just absolutely an amazing way to take N64 games and get them running natively on modern hardware. And it would allow for things like higher frame rates, widescreen, etc. And Majora's Mask was just released this way using this method. So this program was the one that did the automatic decompiling, and then there was manual interaction to get it to where you see it now. And it just shows so much unbelievable promise for those games. So while this is something to be very excited about, also have realistic expectations. Once again, this isn't drag and drop a ROM into a program and poof, you have an HD version of it. There's a lot more to it than that. But even a dum-dum like me that barely knows anything about programming could understand what this could do, how much time could be saved, and how this is really going to end up being a very cool thing for anybody who really has the time to do this and then sit through and tweak some of these older N64 games to have them running natively. I'd really like to see what else could be done. And of course, if you want examples of this, Majora's Mask is available now, but also look at some of the manual decompiling and reverse engineering projects like Mario 64 and stuff like that. There's really just an incredible amount of potential, and I just think this is an awesome project for, even if you're not a fan of the N64, if you're a fan of emulation, this just takes it a whole other step farther. So definitely check out Chris's post, check out the video that was embedded in there, and also check out MVG's video. You're probably all subscribed to MVG anyway, but I think if you really want to know everything about these, both of those videos would really give you everything that you needed to know about it. And then if you're already a programmer, then you could kind of take the next steps if you want to actually give this thing a try. Next up, another awesome video from GameSack. This one really hit home for me because it was about Sega Master System FM Sound games. So basically, the Master System that was released in Japan was actually the Mark III. There was different versions of it, and it had an attachment that allowed you to use FM audio instead of the PSG audio. And then later on, when they released the MK2000, the Japanese Master System, it actually had that FM chip built in and had the ability to use both PSG and FM at the same time, which I believe is the only way you could do that using both of those sound chips simultaneously is on that one model. But I didn't know any of this stuff existed when I was a kid. Even though where I lived on the East Coast, there were no stores that carried the Master System, I had a neighbor that came from California that very creatively sold me his in order to get a Genesis, and I loved it. I just thought it was amazing hooking up Space Harrier via RF, playing it in 3D, and I never would have guessed that there was a completely different soundtrack on there on that same cartridge that I was putting in. So if you want to hear the differences between those on every single game, Joe has you covered. And this is one of those things where, I'm so appreciative that he took the time to do this, because this is probably not going to be a million hit video. And he even joked a couple times in it, like, are you still with me? But I just think anybody that's a fan of the SMS, even if some of the games aren't your favorite style of game to play, hearing the before and after really puts things into perspective of how Sometimes the FM soundtrack was better, sometimes it was definitely not complete yet, and other times it's just a matter of opinion. So if you're a fan of the SMS, absolutely sit through this one. I watched it in a couple of different parts because I definitely didn't want to just leave this in the background. I wanted to actually pay attention and listen to the music in there. And some of the differences were really striking. Some of the PSG sounds were kind of ear piercing, and the FM sounds were way softer to me. But everybody's ears, speakers, headphones are different, etc. I don't know. Just if you're a fan of the SMS or old school video game audio, chip tunes, whatever, just give this one a try because I think you'll appreciate the differences between them. And if you really don't care about that stuff, don't bother. I mean that with love. Sometimes some people just don't really get into this stuff as much as I do, but I think audio is equally as important to video, especially when it's bad. So when you hear some of these examples, it's like, wow, we could have gotten that on the Master System in the US, but I don't know. Give it a watch. Developer Darkbits has just released a brand new top-down shooter style game for the original NES. The game is called Dataman, and it puts you inside a computer where your goal is to save the CPU. So it's pretty cool. It looks like a fun game. You could purchase the ROM for $10, or you could purchase a complete in-box physical copy from Broke Studio for about $55. The cartridge itself is compatible with and optimized for both PAL and NTSC, and also comes with the ROM. So if you're like me, who appreciates physical media but really just wants to play on my Mister, then this is the perfect thing for you to buy because you get both at the same time. As with all modern cartridge releases, I would always suggest making sure that it's beveled before putting it into your original NES console. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I would like to politely but firmly repeat myself that when companies go the distance to make sure their products are built correctly, they want you to check it. They want you to post that picture on social media and be like, hey, Broke Studios release is beveled correctly. Thank you. So don't feel bad doing that. And if mistakes happen, give the company a chance to make it right. But I just think that the more people spread the word about what a properly made cartridge is, the better it is for everybody, especially the companies that make them right to begin with. So I believe their past releases were all great, but yeah, I mean, I would feel comfortable buying this one and just double check it, and it looks like a pretty cool game. Also, the game has a couple of different two-player modes, which I think is really important to a lot of people. Some people like myself just like to sink into a game and, just kind of zone out, but other people really love making it a social experience, so having two different modes, a competitive mode and a team player mode, I think is a lot of fun. So check out the post for more info. Links to absolutely everything, including a little trailer for it, are right here in the post. But this looks like a fun NES game. A new firmware was just released for the Saroo project, which is the ROM cart for the Sega Saturn. Still a little crazy that I get to call it a ROM cart because it technically is. But there's a bunch of things that were added. And first and foremost, the ability to sort alphabetically with the stock firmware is now implemented. And that's one of the main reasons people were looking for some of the third-party firmwares. But the original one is a bit snappier, and now it just sorts alphabetically. So that's a pretty big deal for people that have more than a handful of games on this cart. There's also Spanish language option, which was added, which I'm always so appreciative whenever people add language support to anything, because I know this is so cheesy, but I love making the world a smaller place, and I love having people who just don't speak whatever native language a project's in now have the ability to use it. So that's awesome. It also supports booting from CD-ROM or alternate ODE. So if you leave this in and the Saroo doesn't play the game that you want to play, you could just leave it in and boot to disk, which is awesome. Or I guess if you have an ODE in there as well. Not sure the use case for that, but whatever. That's something. The more features, the better. In-game soft reset has been added, and also the ability to use it as a backup memory cart when booting from CD or ODE is implemented. So I guess that alone might be a reason for people to pick this up. Like, hey, let me get this as a backup cart for my original discs, but I'll use it whenever I feel like it for loading backups or whatever. And also, there is the ability to have custom menu support on this. In the Shiro post here, they had some different ones that people had put together that looks pretty cool. There's some animated backgrounds and stuff like that. One's based off of Snatcher, which I know it's important to a lot of people. And you could even build your own if you'd like, using instructions that are here. So if you're even remotely interested in the Saroo, I would definitely give Dave's post a read. But if you have one, absolutely go through this post and see, and definitely update the firmware. And I think this project's definitely moving along. I've heard of another version being worked on that might actually be the one to go to, but if you've already purchased one, this is, I mean, I'm sure it's already going to be running well. Just as usual, check the build quality, the basics. Is the PCB much thicker or thinner than an original memory Saturn RAM cart? Is it beveled, et cetera, et cetera? But I just think this project's really starting to take off, and I think this is very, very exciting for anybody who wants to use original Saturn hardware. The Tink VHS video is finally out. It's actually a video about any 480i analog video that you want to capture. So basically any analog tape media or Laserdisc or anything like that. I just been referring to it as the VHS video because that's how most people would probably use it. But I've been testing it with Super 8, Laserdisc, etc. And I think this is a great way for people who already own RetroTinks to digitize their old home movies in most scenarios. I repeated so many times in this video, it's not for every scenario. This isn't the one perfect solution for everything. There's going to be different methods that'll be better for different people, especially pro level capture stuff. I thought I was very clear about that, but I just wanted to repeat it. But definitely, if you already own one, give this video a watch and just give it a try. And maybe you'll say, hey, this is more than I would ever needed. Maybe you'll say, oh, hey, it's not quite ready for what I'm looking for it to do. Or like I mentioned in the video, if you're somebody that uses direct RF capture, like Doomsday style or anything like that, you could actually use this at the same time as you're doing the direct capture, which means you get that giant file that you could process afterwards, but you would be able to use the Tinks to get audio as well as sync up your video and have a reference file that you know is decent quality. So, I don't think people are going to go out and buy a RetroTINK 4K just to use with Doomsday, but if you already have one, use it. 100% definitely. That reference file will be gold for you. So I was just really excited to finally get this out because I was so happy that Mike took the time to implement all of these features. And they're the only scalers that have these features in from the retro gaming world. And it is not a dig or anything. These are not features that are ever needed at all for video games. Mike specifically added all of this stuff for magnetic tape media and Laserdisc. So this is a pretty big deal. And I think perspective is pretty huge too, which most people seem to be getting with this. But in the Laserdisc world, you'll often hear people talk about multi-$1,000 Lumagen processors, which I'm sure would do a better job for Laserdisc. But if you already own this for all of its other features, this totally holds its own. And I show that. I show some comparisons to direct capture, with post-processing and basically as good as I know how to get it today versus just a basic capture through the Tink 4K. And I think the direct capture came out a little better, but it's really hard to tell the difference. And the whole point I was trying to make is that these are not bad solutions by any means. So, do I think you should run out and buy one just for tape transfer? If you're a tape transfer service, yeah, I do. Most of them just use the easiest method possible that results in a pretty bad transfer. So picking up one of these, you could advertise 4K transfers that don't suck and people will actually be happy with them. But other than that, no. If you're just somebody that's like, I have 15 old VHS tapes, what's the best way to transfer it? Don't go spend $750 on this to do it. To borrow somebody else's, and I'll have a deep dive magnetic tape transfer VHS video coming up by the end of the year. It's very complicated, and I'm going to focus specifically on 480i and basic stuff because there's just so much involved in this. But this was kind of practice for it. So if you saw anything in here that the example wasn't as good as you hoped, and I absolutely cheesed out on like 2 or 3 of the examples because I knew this was going to have to be a video in its own or a section in its own. So the important examples for you, the comb filtering, the time-based correction, all of that matched up. But some of the compression stuff, I was like, I could spend an hour giving examples of this. So I'll do better for the VHS video. It might actually be a series of videos because that's how long this is taking and that's how much time it's taking to explain all this stuff. But anyway, I really hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope this is a help for people. Thank you so much to Mike. The only mistake I made is the Tink 5X firmware that's required for all of these features is still one of the beta firmwares. It's public beta, but you can't just go to the Tink website and get the normal one. So use the link that's in the post here. I updated the post to have this as well as the YouTube video. So that's the only mistake I made was just forgetting to mention that, but that's not a big deal. You just download the free firmware update right here. So, congrats to Mike for another awesome release of the 4K. This thing, there was a lot more in this batch, but and it's just really cool to see the popularity of this and how many people actually want it, because it was a staggering number this time. So, thanks to Mike for doing all this, and thanks to you for your support. And hopefully I could do an even better job with that VHS video coming up. So we'll see. Let me know. Next up, Tito from Macho Nacho Productions just did a video about the NintenDrawer, a 72-pin replacement for the NES designed by Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D. The device is about $50, and it is another replacement tray, but this one, Tito with love called it over-engineered, and I agree. I think that's a perfect term for it, because there's so much involved in this thing. It's got a nice flex cable. The cartridge slides in and out. You don't push down, but it does still slide out, and while there is a bit of a tight grip, because the cartridge connector slides back a little bit, you're able to grab it with two hands and pull it out. So it doesn't feel death grippy, even if the grip is about the same, because it gives you the opportunity to hold it with two hands. You don't have to just grab it with your two fingers and kind of try to wiggle it out like some of the other solutions out there. So definitely check out the video for more details, but this was just a cool project. It looked pretty neat. I laughed at the magnet snapping things into place, and the first thing I thought was, what if somebody puts it on top of a CRT? Are those magnets small enough to not matter? So I'm actually kind of curious about that, but I think they're so small that it wouldn't really make a difference, but definitely worth checking. If you're going to be placing your NES right on top of or right below a CRT, you might want to double check that. But overall, I mean, it looks very cool, and it's another awesome Macho Nacho video if you're interested. So I think, anybody who's curious about this, definitely watch the video or scroll through the post that Tito was nice enough to write here and see what you think of it. I think it was excellent, but am I the only crazy person out there that wants to push down? Like, I love this project. I love all the projects like this. I totally think anything that enhances original hardware is a good thing. But if I play my original NES, it's not the one I had as a kid, but it looks just like it. I want to push down just like I used to. I know that's such a dumb thing to say. I realize that. You're welcome to make fun of me in the comments. But I like the functionality of the original. I just think that's such a weird and unique feature of the original NES. But I do imagine that if people just want a reliable solution, that they don't have to worry about all that crap, then, this is probably something that you should consider. So, yeah, I don't know, definitely check out Tito's video, and the price is right. It looks very cool. Let's, and the testing they went through to make sure that it survived, use over time. Tito shows that in the video. That alone is worth, even if you're not interested in this, watch the video just for that. My fellow nerds will be like, yeah, they did that right. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. I'm just going to skim through and add my thoughts where I feel like it, but if you want visual examples and a lot more details, please check out Tito's video. First up, if you're having any HDMI CEC issues with the Mr. FPGA, you could have a couple of different solutions to fix that. You could use just a CEC removing dongle, which are cheap and pretty easy to plug in, or you could cut a pin on the chip from the DE10 Nano. I agree with Lou's perspective on this, that I don't really want to cut anything, especially because you don't know what you might need that for in the future. Probably nothing, but I just think if CEC is giving you a trouble, spending a couple of bucks on just a dongle to plug in into the back, it's probably a better idea. But I still love that people are doing this and documenting stuff like this. So, this is good info to have. More info in the video if you want on that. Next, the first version of the IREM M106 core has been released, and at the moment, only the Air Assault, the vertical scrolling shooter, is working, but Martin will be adding support for the rest of the game soon. Next, Taki Udon has made a post asking if users want a component video connector on the new Mr. DE10 clone that they're working on. And I kind of have a strong opinion about this. Just either make it exactly like the original or give all of the output options that are available and kind of figure out how to do it in an easier way, because the Mr. project can be very confusing. And I don't mean that as a dig. We all need to remember that the Mr. project started around a dev board that was never designed for this to save cost. So now it's kind of funny that Takayudan is making a clone of that board to save cost even more, but if you're going to do an exact copy, cool. That way everybody's accessories and everybody's mindset stays the same. But if you're going to add features, you have to keep all of that stuff in mind. And this is from 15 plus years of product development, more than that now. Geez, I'm pushing 20. Wow, I'm old. Anyway, I do have a ton of experience with stuff like this. So I could say if you add component video outputs, you just got to make sure that the use case and the workflow scenario is going to match. So what happens if somebody plugs that in and their Mr. INI file isn't set correctly? Are you going to share composite video with component with some kind of switch in there? What about S-video? What about RGB? So I almost think that having an exact clone and another one with every option, or a shared option, with a toggle switch or something like that. I just think a lot of thought needs to be put into that if you start thinking about adding features like that, because it's not like it's a fork of the project with its own software. You got to remember that we're using the same Mr. software on this hardware, which is what's so appealing about this. So I don't know. That's an interesting one, but that's definitely something that you got to think of total workflow and how are you going to be able to pull it off without any kind of software fork as well. But I don't know. I can't wait to see what they come up with, and I would really love to buy one for testing because I think this is a very cool way to continue supporting the Mr. project, even if the D10 goes away somehow. Next, a beta for the Sega System 18 core is expected to be released this coming Friday. It looks like Otego's team is resolving issues with the VDP chip as the backgrounds are finally looking like they're being processed correctly. And the Sega Saturn core received more updates to both the VDP-1 and VDP-2. Radiant Silvergun is now playable even more, which is awesome. That's a very cool game. I always enjoyed that one. So as always, thanks to SRG 320 for doing the impossible here. And lastly, Shane Lynch has made some progress in his reverse engineering of the Sega Megaplay hardware, which is that Genesis kiosk-style arcade board. So this would allow you to emulate that. So you could have that same put your quarter in for X amount of lives gameplay as you would have in the arcades back in the day if you had found something like that, which is a really neat way to kind of preserve that experience and be able to experience it in FPGA. So as always, thanks to Shane for all the stuff he does. And of course, and especially thank you to Lou, because I would never be able to keep up with all of the stuff without him. So please consider subscribing to Lou's Patreon. I don't think people realize how much it costs to keep stuff like this going. You really wouldn't believe it unless you tried doing it yourself. Trust me, it's annoying how much you got to spend. So if you are as big of a fan of Lou's videos as I am, consider supporting, or at the very least, just subscribe to him on YouTube, because that's completely free and he deserves the sub. So thanks, Lou. I am absolutely thrilled to announce that thanks to Marco Retro, we now have a complete and detailed downscaling section of RetroRGB. I had asked Marco to take the videos that he's made over the years and write up just a quick summary for each. So each downscaling device that Marco's tested has its own dedicated page. We have a landing page there, so you could just click whichever one you want. The landing page has the world's worst selector thingy on the grid. That's mine. I did that. Don't blame Marco for that. That's my completely forgotten skills on how to do website stuff. But the content is what matters, and it's absolutely top tier. It's something I've been wanting to work on forever, but I just didn't have the time. And Marco's videos and analysis have been absolutely top tier. So if you were wondering how to get 480p, 720p, 1080p, whatever, down to 480i or 240p in different formats using different devices, this is definitely something you're going to want to look through. The main page on the site has basically everything that you would need to get you started, a quick primer, links to all of the different downscaling reviews. I threw two of mine in here, so if you click on one of these and it's suddenly not nearly as good as the rest, that's because it's mine, not Marco's. But honestly, this is just very, very, very exciting. And, while I think most people listening might understand why this is important, just a very, very quick overview. It's really easy to take old media and put it on older CRTs. Getting a VHS or a DVD and putting it on a CRT is easy. However, what if you want more modern content, either stuff that was natively in higher resolutions than a CRT could handle, or even if it's old movies, but you're trying to watch it through a streaming box or something, being able to get it down to signals that are compatible with CRTs is far more compatible or far more complicated than you would imagine, because it's not just dropping the resolution. You also have aspect ratio, you have how you remove each line. There's so much that goes into it, and it's something that I think is really cool. And I've had experiences watching content on CRTs, especially now where we could do stuff using processors that were not ever available in the 80s and 90s. I just think it's an experience that it's not matched anywhere else. It's kind of like classic cars, right? Some people will look at a classic car and go, that's dumb. Why don't you just lease a brand new Hyundai for nothing a month? While other people will look at a classic car and see a work of art. They want to pump the gas and start the car and feel the engine roar, and that's the experience that really can't be matched. And it's the exact same with CRTs. The way CRTs draw a signal can never truly be replicated with modern stuff. Devices like the TINK 4K sure as heck come close, but it's not ever going to be the same as a single beam of light drawing one line at a time at the back of a piece of etched glass. So taking newer content and experiencing in that way with no motion blur and no latency is definitely something that's worthwhile. So I'll stop preaching downscaling. I'll point you to the section. The post I wrote was basically just a little hype post. So you want to go straight to retrorgb.com/downscaling.html, or it's going to be in the left toolbar and all that other stuff like it normally would be anyway. So thanks so much to Marco for doing this. I really appreciate the time spent. I'm glad he has joined as a contributor, but also just even if this is the only thing he's ever contributed, it's still massive and so appreciated. I'm so appreciative of it. So definitely check it out. Take your time, go through, look at the different reviews. You'll be surprised at which of the downscalers that were supposedly for years known as the ones to go to don't really do exactly what you would think. Some of them are still awesome, by the way, but I don't know. I think you'd be impressed with what Marco's found. And the OSSC Pro and RetroTINK 5X really seem like top tier options at this moment, but check them out, see what works for you. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff alive. Even just sharing links with your friends and telling people about what we do is awesome, but the people who are the monthly supporters really are. Will be indebted to you for the rest of my life. Thank you for allowing this to continue. I'm going to try my best to keep putting out videos that help, and we'll see what we can do. But thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.